Freemasons are taught that the fraternity is supported by three great pillars of wisdom, strength, and beauty. Wisdom and strength were always pretty self-explanatory to me, but I felt like beauty was an odd thing to have as a pillar for a fraternity. But I thought, why is that odd? Why should beauty be an odd thing for a fraternity? And perhaps it's because for most of my life and our lives, we've had this modern brainwashing that, we're men, we're not supposed to care about beauty. Beauty is for women, it's some sort of female trait. When in reality, most works of art, music, architecture, poetry, throughout human history, some of the greatest examples of those things were all made by men. We've been programmed for decades now that design and fashion and caring about how you look are feminine traits. And I think this is mostly simply for corporations to sell products. Research shows that 85% of the purchasing decisions within a household are made by the woman. So it's no wonder that all of the marketing is pushed towards them and their perspective. But if we could for a second return to a time when we weren't constantly inundated with psychological operations and propaganda and marketing, and return to the days of our Masonic forefathers, we would see that beauty and masculinity have always worked hand in hand. So what is beauty? Many will say that the pillar of beauty is referring to inward beauty or harmony, the beauty of the mind, the heart, and the spirit, that we as Masons are building our spiritual temple, that house not made with hands. I totally agree with this and will not be debating this point tonight, but I'm simply going to add that this is not the entire story, that physical beauty is every bit as important as inward beauty. Most of you are familiar with the Hermetic principle of correspondence, as above, so below. It's basically this idea that there is harmony between different planes of existence, that the physical, the mental, and the spiritual all work together. And if you think of it this way, it can also be expressed as without, so within. Our physical environment and the aesthetics of that environment influence our spiritual and mental states. Cultivating beautiful environments and embracing physical beauty in our own lives aids us in building inward harmony and beauty. Ancient men knew this, our ancient brethren knew this, and their temples and their cities reflected this knowledge. But today there seems to be a war on beauty, an intentional embrace of ugliness. In our cities, we tear down beautiful buildings and replace them with sterile modern structures that are either chaotic or totally removed of ornamentation. Statues and works of art are destroyed or defaced in some sort of new ritualistic protest. The first acts of despots such as Mao or the Taliban, or take your pick, are usually to destroy the beauty of old. You can see here just some more recent examples of some of our Masonic brethren. We've got General Andrew Jackson, the Marquis de Lafayette, and General Albert Pike, who sadly their statues have all been either defaced or destroyed in recent years. Duke Medical School recently declared that dress codes are a form of white supremacy, which seems like such a ridiculously racist statement that I don't even know how to respond to it. We're inundated with modern art and modern statues that instead of the statue of David, we now have this beautiful statue of a urinal here, or of a blow-up dog, or this painting here in the middle, which actually sold recently for $89 million. It seems that modern art tends to be more about money laundering than beauty these days. In the Renaissance, the great masters of old, Da Vinci, Raphael, Michelangelo, they received their commissions for their work based on merit, whereas today's public art and the funds associated with them are often distributed due to politics or quotas based on the artist's intersexual identity. In Nashville, we see publicly funded art of today, here on the left, This is the Styx installation. I'm sure a lot of you have ridden around many times. And then to the right is the Parthenon, the only full-scale replica of the Parthenon in the world here in Nashville. And it just so happens that the lead architect of that project was a member of this lodge. He also happened to be the architect of the Grand Lodge building downtown. It seems that priorities have changed. Today, beauty has taken a back seat to efficiency or sustainability or to profit. And I'd argue, though, that the most sustainable way to build is to build something beautiful. If it is timeless and beautiful, it will continuously be repurposed. If it is cheap and ugly, it will eventually be torn down and wasted. Today, as individuals, we're more obese, we're ungroomed, we have less eloquent vocabularies, our literature has been dumbed down, our movies are now mostly made up of endless sequels instead of new works of art. And you can see here the working classes of 100 years ago dressed better than we do today. So you may push back here and say, well, wait a second, Ryan, isn't beauty subjective? Isn't beauty in the eye of the beholder? How dare you call this modern art ugly? I'm in real estate. I work mostly in commercial real estate, do a little bit of residential, done that for over 10 years. And the idea that beauty is totally subjective is just laughable to me, because every single day I see beautiful properties sell for more and sell faster. I see ugly properties sell for less and sit on the market. Numbers don't lie. At some point, ugly is ugly, beautiful is beautiful. Obviously, taste and trends change. There are cultural differences. But I do think there's universal truths that remain timeless. There is objective beauty. We simply have to ask, what makes something beautiful? The G in our logo, in between the squares and compasses, stands for both God and geometry. And I'd argue that they're one and the same. Sacred geometry is the language of the great architect of the universe. It is nature's blueprint for beauty, a blueprint that's written in the stars, that was known to ancient man, and passed down to us through the awe-inspiring structures that they built. The patterns within you are the patterns within the cosmos, and these patterns are pervasive in nature, astronomy, and biology. And they're the patterns that we also find in great works of art, music, and architecture. Beauty truly is a fragment of the divine. It is a balance or harmony between order and chaos, light and shadow, and is a representation of the essential goodness in the world. So why is beauty so important? Beauty calls you to a higher mode of being, to that which is higher than yourself. It challenges you. It is an antidote to suffering and irrational cynicism. Beauty is creative intelligence that provides hope and forces one to focus on the present. It creates a lasting emotional connection and inspires transcendence. It is not optional. A life without beauty is one that's not worth living. The cathedrals that were built by our ancient stonemason brethren are a reflection of their values. And they're so objectively beautiful that for hundreds to thousands of years, people from all over the world have traveled thousands of miles over dangerous terrain to visit them. You go to any of these things today, and if you haven't bought a ticket ahead of time, you're not getting in. That crosses culture, crosses race, crosses all divides. And not only are these structures beautiful, but they reflect those values and morals of the builders themselves. Again, as without, so within. The ancient stonemason knew this, and the earliest Freemasons did as well. It is for this reason that it is said to be a foundational pillar of our order. We are taught that it is necessary, I'll repeat that it is necessary that there be wisdom to contrive, strength to support, and beauty to adorn all great and important undertakings. And that if we are supported by these great pillars, then our fraternity will be impregnable from without, and our foundations can only be shaken from discord from within. The fraternity today truly does face a great and important undertaking. We're on the edge of a demographic cliff that will lead to greatly diminished membership numbers and revenue. With these decline in resources, it will become more difficult to maintain our beautiful buildings. A flood is coming and we cannot stop it. But we can build some arcs so that after the flood we can rebuild. Since we cannot change the decline in numbers, and I would argue perhaps we shouldn't even try, the Freemasons of the future will judge us by how we manage and preserve our assets of today. So what does this look like? When we are taught that it is necessary for beauty to adorn all great and important undertakings, I think our founding brethren were most certainly talking about physical beauty, not only inward beauty. To adorn means to decorate or add beauty to something in order to enhance its appearance, to add ornamentation, accessories, or other embellishments in order to increase the appeal of the person, object, or space. And when we look to the early days of our fraternity, these adornments are everywhere. We built magnificent buildings in every major city in the world, with ornaments of marble and gold and filled with handcrafted furniture and fine art. Brethren had custom aprons that were made of high-quality materials. Officer jewels and jewelry of gold and silver had a level of craftsmanship that is unequaled today. Men wore suits, ties, and tuxedos to lodge. Brothers composed Masonic music, operas, poems, and toasts. Swords, chalices, banners, carpets, cutlery, and every type of decor imaginable were crafted with beauty and care to be used in ritual and to adorn our lodges. Past masters' portraits were professionally made. We had libraries filled with custom woodwork. We had silver working tools, leather-bound books with beautiful artwork, mosaic floors, and classical architecture filled with sacred geometry and symbolism. That was the standard. When Cumberland and Phoenix Lodge met in 1856 to discuss building a new lodge after its prior one had been lost to a fire, the brethren made it a stated goal that the new lodge was to be an ornament to the city. Beauty was a requirement, not an option. Our ritual itself is beauty in action. The words, music, theatrics, props, dramas, story, costumes, these are all tools of outward beauty that are used to build inward beauty. With these standards, our membership rolls were filled with men who were the bulwarks of beauty for their day. Mozart, Kipling, Robert Burns, Mark Twain, Duke Ellington, John Wayne, Clark Gable, John Philip Sousa, and Norman Rockwell, just to name a few. These men were the cornerstones of the culture of their time. I would argue that beauty is a billboard. Like attracts like. Freemasonry did not make these men the leaders in their respective crafts, but the beauty and the standards of the fraternity attracted men of the highest caliber to join. How many of these men would join today if they walked in many of our lodges? As Freemasons, we're not allowed to recruit. Men must ask to join of their own free will and accord. Beauty is the opposite of authoritarianism. It invites, it doesn't command. In our past, we built the most beautiful buildings in the city, and we publicly marched through the streets in suits and full regalia. We performed elaborate cornerstone laying ceremonies and held feasts that were the talk of the town. We opened up our beautiful buildings to the world. We held public events and shows. We maintained high standards of beauty and exclusivity that made us the desire of the leading men of the age. I've heard too often brethren today propose that in order to solve our membership challenges, we must discard this ancient landmark and start soliciting men to join. That we must lower our standards by making the ritual shorter, having one-day degree classes. In many jurisdictions, these aren't just ideas, they've been tried. And everywhere they've been tried, they've yielded disastrous results. In Tennessee, we removed the beautiful music from our degrees, I'm going to assume for the sake of time or for ease. All the while, the challenges we have faced over the last 50 years are only exacerbated. Great and important undertakings require great and important men. And restoring the pillar of beauty within our fraternity is necessary to attract these men to join and will inspire us to be the caliber of men that are worthy of that beauty. So what's stopping us? Well, for one, beauty isn't cheap, nor should it be. It requires dedication and time and skill and resources. I would argue, however, that it often isn't as expensive as we think. Our fraternity has been around for hundreds of years, and I plan on it being around hundreds of more. If you have a long-term focus in mind, the cheap options are always more costly in the end. If you build something to last, it is always more affordable in the long run. For too long, we've looked at the expense side of our budgets instead of revenue. We've cut everything there is to cut. We must raise our dues and/or find alternative sources of revenue. We must invest wisely and manage the assets that we have, not just for the benefit of our individual lodges, but for the fraternity as a whole. This may require tough choices, may require mergers or relinquishing of charters and the sale of assets. But we have an enormous opportunity ahead of us if our physical assets are managed wisely. For too long, we've shunned beauty out of fear. And that may sound odd. Why would anyone be afraid of beauty? But beauty requires us to make decisions, and those decisions put our taste on display for the world. Inaction is the safe route. There's less judgment in the status quo. So we leech off the beauty of our brethren of old rather than be bold and create our own beautiful lodges and ornaments for today. We've played it safe for too long. We must have beautifully designed websites. These are the digital temples of today. Quality modern men will not knock on the door of Freemasonry if your website looks 20 years old and hasn't been updated in years. We can no longer outsource our beauty to our wives or the Eastern Star chapters. It's not up to them to decorate our lodges. It's up to you. These actions, require some sort of self-awareness. It's up to you to show up to lodge looking your best. And maybe you don't know what that is. Maybe you don't know how to decorate your lodge. So perhaps it requires hiring professionals that do, men that are skilled and trained in the art of design. I'd argue that it is past time to rebuild our temples. It is time to raise our standards of dress and decor, and it is time to create new Masonic art, music, and poetry. We must repair or replace worn-out regalia and costumes. We must incorporate music back into our degrees. We must build beautiful spaces that inspire us to higher callings and attract like-minded men to join us. The Bible on our altars tells us that you shall know them by their fruits. The world will certainly judge us by our actions and by our character. But we are most certainly judged by our aesthetics. We like to say that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but people certainly do. The Russian philosopher Dostoevsky once famously said that beauty will save the world. And my argument and my plea tonight is that if we repair this crumbling pillar of our fraternity, it may just save us. And with that, I'm open to any questions or debate. We're currently allowed to play music in our degrees as long as it's not while someone is speaking. Somewhat of a problem with that is some of the songs. We used to have a Master Mason song and an Entered Apprentice's song, and they're somewhat long. There's not a great part in the degree to play them unless you specifically set aside time for that. So we have the option to do it right now, but it's not the best option in my mind. It's not intentional as it once was. So, and my only assumption, I've tried to look up the history of why that was changed. I can't find an exact reason. My best guess is that you had lodges that perhaps didn't have an organist, didn't have someone who could play music, didn't have the funds, so they chose to just eliminate it entirely. My opinion, it would have been a better option to allow the lodges that did have the means to do it to do so, and those who don't have the means, it wouldn't be required. Somebody raise their hand. Sir.
I know we have a traditional observance lodge here in Tennessee, and obviously for these type of events, you all have asked people to dress appropriately, which is a good thing. do we know of any lodges that have gone back to having their stated meetings where they encourage the brethren to wear a suit? I mean, I'll say at my lodge, we typically only our stationed officers will wear anything quasi formal, but I mean, in general, have you seen any sort of trend back towards that in any local lodges or anything in the state?
We don't have a true dress code other than for our officers as well. But I think what that's done is created a culture where guys naturally dress better. You know, once you see it in action, see it in practice, you don't want to be the only guy that looks bad. So I think that's a good first step. It's a little more palatable than making everyone do it. And obviously, if somebody shows up, we're not going to just turn them away, right? But I think you build a culture to where people want to do it rather than they have to do it. Um, that said, I just recently saw on Ionic Lodge's Trestle Board, they're instituting a dress code for stated meetings. They're asking people to at least wear a coat. So,
what do you attribute the decline of beauty in the Masonic lodges to? Is it the cultural messaging that you spoke of, or is it something else? Like, what's the history?
yeah, I have a few theories on why beauty's declined within Freemasonry. We're not immune to the culture. Obviously, this is something that pervades a lot of different institutions. Uh, a few main reasons. One, after both World Wars, we really had these gigantic booms where we just let in a lot of men. And some of those men may have not been the quality that we wanted. Um, it became more of a populist working man movement, but even that I don't think is a good enough answer, because that photo I showed before had working class men that were dressed nicely. My great grandfather was a Mason. He was at Old Hickory Lodge. Um, dropped out of high school, or dropped out of middle school at 8th grade. Started as a janitor at DuPont. Worked his way into becoming a self-taught electrician. He never had $1 a day in his life, but he had a suit, and he wore it to church, and he wore it to lodge. So, you know, this whole excuse that you don't have money or this, that, or the other, quite frankly, I don't buy it. If you care about something, if you value about something, you'll make it work. And it seems, I think, since beauty is a reflection of what a culture or society values, I think a lot of it goes back to just our values have fallen, they've slipped. But we can use that as an excuse, or we can do something about it. We can hold ourselves to a higher standard. I don't think Freemasons should hold themselves to the standard of the culture that they're in. We should hold ourselves to our own standards.
When you think about the trajectory of the standards of beauty within our fraternity, we all agree it's declining. So what would you propose or suggest, or what do you think would be things that we could do to turn that trajectory towards a more favorable and beautiful direction?
So the numbers problem is an interesting one. It is a problem because there's revenue associated to it. And whether you like it or not, it takes money to run an organization. So as long as our revenue is tied solely to dues, we've got two options. We've got to get more members, or we've got to raise dues. If you look at the demographics we face, there's no way to replace the amount of members that we're going to lose. So we have to raise dues, and probably should. But even that's a tall order. I think that overwhelmingly, lodges are going to have to find ways to utilize their real estate assets. We're going to have to rent our buildings. We're going to have to bring in other sources of revenue. And if you look at Masons in the early days, you had some big lodges that had big, beautiful buildings, and a lot of times they had mixed-use purposes. They were a theater, or they had office space, or they had retail stores underneath. They had some way to generate revenue beyond dues to support the facilities. And then you had a lot of other lodges that didn't have a building at all. They met in taverns, or they met at this other lodge building, and they were more agile, nimble, lean lodges, 20 men that would show up, and they would draw out the lodge on the floor they were at in chalk, and then they'd wipe it up over the lodges after the lodge was done. I think that both of those models work going forward. I think we need big, beautiful lodges, and I think we need small, nimble lodges. But the big lodges that have assets to maintain, they've got to figure out another way because dues aren't just going to cut it. And that applies to not just the Blue Lodge level, but obviously the Grand Lodge level. A lot of these Grand Lodges, ours included, throughout the country, or Scottish Rites or shrines, they all have these big buildings that are becoming increasingly harder to maintain with drop in membership. And I think you have to bring in more revenue. And some of that might mean, I don't want to sell beautiful historic buildings, but not every single one of our buildings is beautiful or historic. And that's a hard pill to swallow for some guys too. I'm biased. I think this lodge is pretty beautiful. I'm sure other lodges think theirs are too. If I go to them and say, you need to sell yours and support this one, I know that's going to fall on deaf ears. But ultimately, if you look at the amount of real estate holdings we have, we don't have a money problem. We have an incredible amount of assets. If they're sold and used and reinvested wisely, all of that will take care of itself. And I think that is a better way to solve the numbers decline than trying to replace the numbers. One, because I don't think it's possible to replace the numbers. And as I said earlier, I don't necessarily think we should. I don't. In order to replace the numbers like we'd have to go to lowering our standards and mass initiating people. And at that point, we've just continued this cycle that got us where we are to begin with. Hope that answered that.
I'd like your perspective on the beauty of the city and how we as citizens can improve that. We have a thought, I mean, that's a big question, but also talk about the building as a billboard and what effect that have on the city if all our lodges were something beautiful.
Yeah, if you look at, let's say it's different in each state and country, but in Tennessee at least, we're started in the early 1800s. 1813 is when the Grand Lodge is formed. Up until around 1890 or so, if you look through the past masters rolls of pretty much any lodge in town, you're going to find mayors, bankers, generals. We had a Speaker of the House of Representatives as a past master of our lodge for the U.S. House of Representatives. It's like been 120 of those in the history of the country. One of them was a member of this lodge. I think that when you look at why men joined, that caliber of men joined back then, well, Freemasonry is the same. Our teachings, our ritual, maybe there's been slight little updates, but Masonry hasn't changed since those days. So Masonry, in my opinion, is every bit as appealing as it used to be. The fraternity has changed, though. We consciously did things over the last 50 to 100 years that I think made the fraternity less appealing to men of certain standards. And we don't need to change Freemasonry. We need to go back, in my opinion, to the things that worked. So in regards to beauty, Cumberland and Phoenix Lodge shared a building in downtown Nashville on the corner of 5th and Church that had a theater in it that housed 2,000 people, or set 2,000 people. It was the biggest and most beautiful theater in the city. Found articles that said it was the most beautiful in the Southeast. And they were constantly bringing the public in and out of that building. I don't think it was, a radical, or it's not unexpected that the movers and shakers of society at that time wanted to be a member of the lodge when literally the most beautiful city, the most beautiful building, the tallest structure in the entire city was a Masonic lodge. Does that mean we need to go build a 60-story tower and whatever? Obviously things are different. The city's much different than today. But I do think that the higher standards of how we treat our buildings and how we ourselves look and act are one of the only ways to get men of a certain caliber. Because even if a man is interested, let's take the equivalent of, back in the day, a lot of the earliest Masons in London were members of the Royal Society. And these were the most brilliant scientists of their day and entrepreneurs and builders. So, who is that today? Elon Musk. Is Elon Musk going to go to a lodge where the building's falling in on itself and the food is terrible and the men are dressed like crap and no one actually understands masonry or the symbolism or the history? They can't speak intelligently of it. Is he going to take hours out of his day to go be a part of that? I don't think so. So we shouldn't expect otherwise.
Two observations. One, you and I talked, going back to when the Cumberland building was the building in Nashville. You and I looked up some things, and I believe that was the one that was used for, it was the prime wedding venue in this town with great after wedding balls and weekend balls that people would go and literally party all night long. And my guess is that was a significant form of revenue, and that was part of the reasoning why. The other observation from what you're talking about is you're saying that 100 years ago there was a level of, your words, men of caliber that masonry was recruiting. And then after the wars, there were great influxes of men into masonry, and the role just went way up. Well, I think that after the wars, those men went through hell in their various wars, and they became a brotherhood. And this truly became more of a fraternity for them, for their war brethren, and possibly lost some of the Masonic relevance. And now what you're talking about is sort of going back to that original concept.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, just make it very clear. I don't think masonry needs to be a rich guys only club. I don't think it needs to be Belmead Country Club. I don't think it has to be the elites only. One of our greatest strengths is that we have men of all different backgrounds, all different socioeconomic statuses. My only argument is that men across the board still held themselves to that higher standard. My great-grandfather, who was a janitor, still showed up with certain standards, and that's the difference. I don't think that our exclusivity is ever, and it says this in our ritual, it's not supposed to be based off of how rich you are or how good looking you are or what your last name is or
To making it a society.
Yeah.
Again, I'm just referring to a level of expectation when men enter the building.
Yeah, and we all know first impressions are everything, and it's really hard to overcome that. And we can talk all day long about how you should look at inward beauty and not outward and yada, yada, yada. But again, if a man walks in and he sees a subpar product, he's going to be less likely to want to join or stick around. And you can hate that all day long, but that's just the truth.
It boils down to value, in my opinion. You're going to have a nice building, you're going to have decent ritual, if you're going to have people showing up dressed properly, it has no value to this guy coming in off the street. It's just another club to him.
Yeah.
It has no value to it. And the dues money, the dues, if you equate dues from years ago, 100 years ago, to what we charge now, we should probably all be paying $1,000 a year for dues.
Yeah.
If you bring it down.
Yeah, if you adjust for inflation past dues, we easily should be paying $1,000 a year. And there are plenty of clubs and groups around town that do. If you join a country club, if you join other organizations, it's going to have dues that make the operations of the organization viable.
But you still got to have something of value when you get there to make you come back.
Yeah, the value is a great point, because the other thing I hear as well, the reason why we couldn't get the leaders of today to join as easily is they don't have time. We're busier today. Sure, I don't debate that. I mean, I'm sure that Mark Twain didn't have all the distractions that we do today. But as busy as someone gets, they are still placing their time somewhere. No one's just sitting, oh, very few people are just sitting out in the woods doing nothing. So no matter how busy we get, people are still going to allocate their time somewhere, and they're going to allocate that time to something that they get value out of. So I think the time thing and the busyness thing is just a giant excuse, in my opinion.
You know, another thing to look at is the number of people that come in but never come back after we raise them. We don't make it where they feel social and belong to all the lodges. It's just hurry up and learn, hurry up and learn to regurgitate the work that we want you to memorize. And at the end of it, go from degree to degree expecting something on the next one. When you get to the third degree, you're like, okay, and not even asked to know anything, memorize, repeat, although it's encouraged. It's just, you drop them off at that point. That's the end, you got to it in the end of it.
Yeah.
Now you pay your dues.
Yeah.
There's, just by attrition, our numbers, but they're what we lose, not just what's not joined.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to attrition. I think that once a man is joined, there are lots of things we can do to encourage him to stay. Part of that's what you're talking about. It's education. It's giving them purpose. It's the product they experience. But I think before you even think of how to keep the men that you raise, the easiest way to fight attrition is to not let men in who shouldn't be here to begin with. If they're joining for the right reasons, if they haven't been, if your initiation fee is so low that people are simply curious and they're like, oh yeah, I'll spend $100 and try that out. Why not? Well, they do. They try it out. It's not what they thought it was, and they're gone. Or maybe they're not gone. They just never come around again because your yearly dues are so cheap. It's worth it to them to pay those yearly dues so that they can wear a ring and they can have a license plate and just tell everyone that they're a Mason. So I think the easiest way to help the attrition problem is, one, have larger barrier to entry, have a higher initiation fee, and attract men that are more invested and not just the people that are curious, that are just window shopping. And then have higher dues that force them to either be active or leave.
I think many of us in the interrogatory have had people ask if they can afford X number of dollars in dues. And when they say, is that a month?
Yeah.
And I've heard that more than once. Well, that's a year, they almost laugh.
Yeah.
It looks cheap. You're going to perceive it as cheap. And that's part
Yeah.
of the problem with the dues. And of course, a lot of the older folks, to them, they've made it to 80. Now the idea of big dues with those, that hurts them, but that's going to be addressed. Those who've been in for a period of time, and those that are younger and newer and have the work for them.
Yeah. Well, there's got to be some sort of balance there. I don't propose to know what the dues should be for every single lodge. They should be high enough to where men are invested and they have buy-in, they have skin in the game, and obviously they should be high enough to cover your operations. But they shouldn't be so high that they exclude good men. Like I said, Belmead Country Club has a $70,000 initiation fee. I don't think we should get to that. But if I do the math on what this lodge's initiation fee was in the early 1900s, it's $1,200 in today's money. We're at $300 right now, and we just recently doubled it. We were at $150. So I don't think we need to have a $10,000 initiation fee, but is $300 high enough? I don't know. I think we should probably keep going.
I wanted to touch on something that you said, touch on this point about attrition as well. One of the things that we talk about making our outward appearance more beautiful, not just in the lodge, but the way we dress and the way we present ourselves and our image to the community and so forth, and websites and so on. But one of the ways to deal with attrition, in my mind, is to make the ritual beautiful.
Yeah.
And to make it resonate with the people that are watching. If you're just running through it as fast as you possibly can, I don't care that you hit all the words. If there wasn't any heart in it, it doesn't resonate with the person that's hearing it. It doesn't resonate with the brother that you want to keep around. And I think that we as Masons, if we take pride and put beauty into our ritual and in the way that we present it, then that will resonate with the brethren. And the brethren will come back and they will stick around. Because it's when you see somebody put heart into ritual, it finds a place.
Well, I'll just touch on that real quick. I talked a lot tonight about just physical beauty, but I couldn't agree more. How well you speak, there's beauty in that. Again, music. Really, a lot of the 7 liberal arts and sciences that we're all told that this is what we're supposed to learn to make ourselves better men. Almost all of those can relate back to beauty somehow. So I think that's the toolkit for beauty. Ken?
Well, I'm hearing 2 things, what you just mentioned as adding beauty, and there's emotion and true caring in when the ritual is delivered as opposed to just reciting it. I'm going to throw a word out related to dues and that value. Okay, you're talking about increasing the dues to the point where when someone pays that, there's value to that to be a member of this organization. In turn, they get value or beauty back by the way the rituals perform, by the way the brethren are brethren within the lodge, not just a, hey, good to see you next Monday kind of thing. Ultimately, it becomes its own society again that make people want to be a part of it and be active in it.
Couldn't agree more.
At the shrine, I think it was last year, we raised the cost of dues, and we lost a lot of shriners.
My statement on the shrine, and please no one take this as being anti-shrine at all. I don't blame the shrine for any of this. You don't have a shrine in a lot of in most parts of the world, the Masonic world. The shrine was in response to our own actions of our own Grand Lodges. Our Grand Lodges took fellowship out of the Blue Lodge when we banned alcohol, and when we didn't ban festive boards, but we basically made them, we took the fun out of it. And it's a very clear, this I think I can prove historically. I know correlation is not causation, but you can look at the anti-Masonic affair hits us. That stems from New York and the Morgan affair. New York Grand Lodge becomes one of the first Grand Lodges to ban alcohol. A lot of people think that it's solely because of prohibition and this religious movement and temperance. That certainly was a part of it, but they banned it before a lot of that happened. And I think it was a PR move in response to the anti-Masonic period. And what you get shortly thereafter in that same place, the shrine is created, because you had a lot of Masons that missed the fellowship that they had in the Blue Lodge, and they went and started a separate organization. And in American Masonry, because of the anti-Masonic period, because of the temperance movement, because of prohibition, we outsourced our fellowship to the shrine. And I don't think that's helped the Blue Lodges. And like I said, that's nothing against the shrine. I think that our Blue Lodges have suffered because of it. And it's probably one of the reasons why dues are so low, is because if you're a member of all these different organizations, then actually your dues aren't that low. Because at the end of the year, if you pay your Blue Lodge and your Scottish Rite and your York Rite and your Shrine and your Eastern Star and all this stuff, well then yeah, maybe you are talking about some real money there. And yeah, I don't want to misconstrue this as me being anti-appendant body. I'm not. I'm very, very active in appendant bodies, but I do think that it's one of our major problems. And if Blue Lodges want to provide the value that we're talking about, if you want men to come around and be active in your Blue Lodge, you have to have fellowship. You have to have education. You have to have these things that we've outsourced to the appendant bodies. You have to do them in your Blue Lodge, and then men will show up and they'll pay more for it. Anything else? Anybody want to argue with me? Uh,
So it sounds like sometimes the Grand Lodge will make a determination and that affects all the lodges underneath it. But this thing that you're talking about, that's more like a grassroots kind of movement. Like, how do those things work together?
So in America, every state has its own Grand Lodge. They're totally independent of one another. They don't influence each other. Their decision-making authority is vested in that Grand Lodge alone. But the anti-Masonic period did touch every state. And we have a Grand Masters Conference. We do speak to one another. We do bounce ideas off of one another. And so while each Grand Lodge made their own decisions, you did have the vast majority of them make the same decisions during this time period. And I would argue they were the wrong decisions. In Tennessee specifically, we had alcohol. I can't pinpoint the exact date, but we had alcohol up until the early 1900s. I think it ended before Prohibition, maybe 10 years before, from best I've been able to tell. And it was never about getting drunk. Drunkenness is still a Masonic offense. You're still supposed to subdue your passions, but you can responsibly drink alcohol with your brethren and not be an idiot. And if someone is being an idiot, that's actually in our ritual as well. It's the duties of the junior warden. We say it every single time we open and close the lodge. We talk about, we're essentially talking about drinking in lodge at refreshment. His job is to superintend the brethren at refreshment. What's he superintending? How many mashed potatoes somebody eats? So, and then if you want to if you think I may be wrong about that, you can go to the installation ceremony, where the public installation ceremony, when the junior warden is told his duties, it goes in even further detail. And I'm going to misquote this, Harold, you might know it, but it essentially says you're supposed to remain temperate so that you can check the intemperance of others. So it's right there where we're talking about drinking in lodges responsibly. There's literally an officer position that's his entire job. So people that tell you that we're not supposed to have alcohol in Masonry, that is an innovation in Masonry, in my humble opinion. I can show you articles from the early 1900s where brethren in Tennessee were arguing that very point, saying that the abolitionists were introducing innovations within the craft. I know that may not be a very popular opinion, but history's history, truth is truth. But there you have it.
So like when it comes to the subject of beauty, for example, say you convince everybody here that beauty is super important, but how do we influence Masonry at large by talking about this here?
I think good ideas can be like viruses. They can spread quickly. That's the best I know. I don't know how to change the world. I don't know how to change the fraternity as a whole. I know how to focus on me and what's within my control and my lodge. And I think if we all start there, that maybe that sounds like a cliche, but that's the place to start. And it's what our ritual teaches. We're supposed to make ourselves better first, and in doing so, we make our families better, we make our communities better, etc. So I think each lodge, each Blue Lodge, needs to really sit down and decide whether they want to survive or not, and not just only survive, but to thrive, and figure out what that's going to take. Because the status quo for a lot of them is just not going to work, and a lot of them are going to go out of business whether we like it or not. So.
Touching back into about in our opening, sort of say how good and how pleasant it is, but there's beauty in that. It's the fellowship that you've touched on a few times. I don't know about everybody else's reason. The reason I joined Masonry was for the fellowship. I joined in just 2006. So my grandparents and my father, my uncles, they weren't my real influence because I was a working adult with children, grown children at that point. But it was the fellowship I was looking for. Yes, there's all the things we find once we get here that we want to improve ourselves, we want to learn, we want to get involved with ritual, but it's the fellowship for me that drove me to Masonry originally. We're hiding behind walls, and a lot of the community don't even know who we are. We don't have parades like we used to. We're not sponsoring events where the public's out. A few lodges do, Julian with their fish fry. They draw a lot of people because it's normal. Some people with their pork butts or chubs they're smoking. But other than those few little things, we're not even known out there. We're not out there supporting local politicians or appearing as Masons welcoming home a soldier who maybe he's having a funeral because he didn't make it overseas. Who sort of disappeared. I know Prince Hall is more visible. They make a point to be visible as part of the community. From my experience with Prince Hall back up north in New Jersey, when there was something like going on, a politician died, or someone was being welcomed home, they appeared in suits and aprons and were there as a group. They were visible.
Yep.
I don't know if that's necessarily what we want to do, but we're not visible out to the public there. Nobody's thinking, gee, I want to join Masonry. They only know about it if they have a friend or a relative. Other than that, no sense.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that again, I try to look to the past when things worked well. That doesn't mean we have to do everything exactly like they did. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try new things. But maybe we should at least look at the spirit and the intent of why they did things in the past. And our degrees, especially once you get in the Scottish Rite or York Rite, they're very theatrical. Very theatrical. Why was that? Or why is that? Well, theater was the thing at the time. So we designed these degrees and rituals in a way that would appeal to the men of that day. We built these buildings that were just unlike anything people in the cities had seen before. We marched around all the time in parades. Parades aren't as big of a thing culturally as they are today. Back then, that was a very big thing, and the men of the lodge would get together for funerals even. They would meet at the lodge and walk together in full procession to the funeral. We have officers positions based around this. The marshal on the Grand Lodge level, the sword bearer. Why do you have these things? They're not used in a stated meeting. They're only used in some sort of parade or procession. So I'm not going to say that we need to just go start doing more parades. Maybe we should, but I think we at least need to understand the intent and why they did that, and what would be the modern day equivalent of a parade. How would we? And it wasn't just parades. It was cornerstone layings. It was funerals. And the easiest modern day equivalent that I know of is just having a website that looks good. It's such low-hanging fruit for so many lodges. This lodge has done a lot of things that have turned it around in the last 4 years, and I need to update these numbers, but last I looked 6 months ago or so, 17 out of our 19 petitions that came from our website. Only 2 had came from our own social circles. Out of those 17 petitions, we've made 12 new Master Masons. Lodges cannot only rely on their friends and their social circles, especially when your lodge has a membership that the vast majority of it is over the age of 60, over the age of 70. If you're retired and you're older, you don't have as large of a social circle. You're not meeting, except for Harold, he's a big partier. But, but the only way you're going to bring in younger, newer members is they have to find you, and they're not the guys of today, the 20, 30-year-olds of today. Very few of them are just going to randomly go knock on the door of your building, especially if your building looks like crap. They're going to go to Google and they're going to search for you. And there's lodges, I won't call anyone out by name, but there's some lodges that have merged recently, and they weren't even on Google Maps. I tried to drive by the lodge. I tried to go to the lodge. I couldn't find the address. I couldn't put it in my GPS to go find the lodge. and then you're wondering why you don't have new members and why you're failing.
It's gonna be in somebody's head first if they wanna look up masonry, look up lodges.
Yeah.
If they don't see us, and like it's the laying of the cornerstones, the parades, maybe those aren't the happenings today, but what replaces that? That makes us still visible. I know one state that's done something different. It's working for them. It doesn't mean it would work anywhere else. That happens to be Massachusetts. The Grand Lodge has money. They take on a 1 month, almost a 2 month campaign of advertising lodges about visiting your lodge, your local lodge in October for open house. We were up there 2019 September. We're seeing billboards. It's on TV. It's in magazine. So when we were at the Grand Lodge, we were asking. They said, "Oh, they started this X number of years ago to make it visible. They're not soliciting. They're just asking people to visit your local lodge, see who's there, see what masonry might be about. Have a glass of lemonade, nice tea, maybe a cookie." Simple little concept they had, but it took some money.
Yeah.
But they said their membership increased because of it. So there are different ideas that would work for different places. That might not work to us.
Yeah, I 100% agree that you cannot have the no solicitation rule while simultaneously not having visibility. That's a recipe for disaster. I do not think we should nor could change the no solicitation rule. So our only option is we have to be more visible. And hopefully, if we're visible, we're putting across a beautiful image that people want to join. And that visibility can, yeah, it can come in a lot of different ways. And I think lodges need to experiment and find out what works for them. I will say in Tennessee, at least, we have a massive opportunity, and that's our Grand Lodge building. It's on one of the most visible roads in the whole world, visible corners in the whole world. It's Music City, USA. I'm in commercial real estate, so I have access to a lot of data and tools that I use when I'm analyzing a property. And one of them uses cell phone data to track people walk past your property or not. And I can even see the demographics and everything. It's kind of creepy. But so I looked at Grand Lodge. We had 18,000 views, 18 million views last year, 7.8 million unique visitors, because some people walk by more than once, right? So 7.8 million people walked by our building last year for a total of 18 million views.
And how long will we keep that until the point where we're charging $100 assessment to everybody, or
It's
something changes that causes revenue to be raised?
yeah, we either raise the dues to support it or we generate revenue to support it. I don't know of another way.
Paying Grand Lodge more than what the lodges are charging the membership for their individual membership.
Yeah.
Happening in the future.
But my argument would be going back to making tough decisions and not just doing what's easy. There's going to be a lot of calls, already a lot of calls, to sell it because that's easy. You know, oh, parking's too expensive down there. We ought to just sell the thing. Okay. My per capita is too high. We ought to just sell the thing. We don't have enough money. That building's worth a lot of money. Let's just sell the thing. None of those are incorrect on the surface. They're just the easy way out. I think it's possible to keep the building and solve all those issues. It's harder, requires work. But you know, the guys that built that thing, they put a lot of work into it. That was hard. That wasn't easy. And they left us, you know, next year will be 100 years since that building was finished. The cornerstone was laid in 1923, finished in 1925. They didn't have as many members back then as we do today. So this whole idea that we need more members to do big things, it's not true at all. We have way more members than I mean, that was actually built by the Scottish Rite. That building was completed not because they had quantity of members, but because they had quality of members. And they raised a lot of money. They had men donate a lot of money. You know, you're talking, I hadn't done the math on this, but you know, the modern equivalent of men writing checks for hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the thing built. Why would they do that? Why would a man 100 years ago give a couple $100,000 in today's money to build something? Well, because he valued it And they weren't just building something, they were building something that was inspiring, something that was beautiful. The bathrooms in that place have marble stalls. I mean, you know, I feel like sadly, this, not saying our Grand Lodge, but in general, as a society, as a fraternity, I would have to bet if we set out today to build a new building without the benefit of prior income. You know, right now we may go build something beautiful, but we've got 200 years worth of investments and we can sell 3 or 4 buildings and pull all that money together and go build something beautiful. They didn't have that. If we just started from scratch today to try to build something like that, I don't think we could do it. I'm not a pessimist, but I don't think we could do it. I think we'd have the cheapest materials. I think it would be ugly. I think it would be efficient, you know, and it'd be off in the suburbs somewhere with a lot of parking. But it damn sure wouldn't be an ornament to the city or something that upholds our values, in my opinion. All right. I've probably said enough or I'm going to get in trouble here eventually. Anything else? Thank you all. All right, we've got a great meal. If you want to stand up, we'll say a prayer and then we'll dismiss for that. Brother Scott, would you